I mean, it's another one. But, when you talk about Crown Heights or Williamsburg, that was actually another story of bigotry that was based on religious beliefs.
Yes.
The Hasidim there insisted on having bus service that had women sitting in the back.
Right.
And then Mayor Bloomberg said, absolutely not. We're not doing that, period. You don't get to do that.
If you want to get a Google bus of your own.
Right. So, is that religious bigotry on the part of the government? I guess in the strictest terms, perhaps. But it's basically saying what's secular is secular. We don't agree as a society with your views that women should be sitting in the back of the bus. There's no way you're going to get public services to agree to that.
There should have been a big fight again, but it should have brought Wiccans in to fight the Hasidim on this one. We think the women should be in the front.
Right, exactly. Look, whether right or wrong, we agree to live by a set of rules that are adopted in a democratic way. The value or the efficacy of that democracy, of course, we always debate. But that's the social contract. This is truly a proposal to violate the social contract. It is very much like the Jim Crow laws and the religious basis for that. Think Progress, has a piece today that highlights, remember the infamous Senator Bilbo, from Mississippi. And all his segregationist arguments were basically religious based. He said God didn't. My religion says God shouldn't. The races shouldn't mix.
Right.
And he had a real basis for saying that because that was the position of the Southern Baptist congregation.
Right. And yes, and this is Ian Millhiser, I think, wrote, and I think we were discussing it yesterday. Unless there's another piece today, which is entirely possible, but. Yeah, that was the heart of what was on what we were reading from there yesterday. It's indisputably religion based. It's just so what? Essentially, there has to be a nexus between the private and religious and the public and secular, and you got to balance it the best you can. The women can't sit both in the front and the back at the same time, all of them. So they sit where they want to sit, and if you don't like it, don't take the bus or hire your own bus. Well, now you're imposing. Now Hasidim have to have more expensive transportation options. Well, yeah, I guess so. But, you don't see me forcing everybody to buy those hats, do you? They're expensive, too.
That's right.
So, I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. And I think that there's a perfectly good legal construct for dealing with this, particularly in the business context. If you want the protection that comes with incorporation, which is our invention here in the secular world, if you want that protection, then here's the cost. You can't discriminate on this basis. If you want to discriminate on that basis, here's the penalty. You don't get to argue as a corporation. You're liable personally. We'll pierce the corporate veil, and you can take your chances as an individual in court with a jury. How much latitude should you be allowed to discriminate? And if you can convince people that you just can't hack it, then maybe the only penalty is you say, you know what, your corporation is dissolved. You can bake cakes for anyone you want on any basis you want, but you have to do it as an individual in your individual capacity, and you're subject to suit in tort. And if you win, you win. If you lose, you lose. If you want some kind of blanket protection, you got to do it under the corporate form, but the price for that is no hate crimes on the corporate clock.
Yeah, unbelievable. It's something else. It's something else. You listen. I not to steer you away from your conversation, but I don't know if you want to talk about this Reddit thing.
Sure. Yes, I actually thought that was kind of interesting because, it seems almost related in a way.
Well, certainly, but what grabbed my attention, as I told you before, and I sent you a couple links that might give you some background on him. If you look at the Daily Dot one, the thing that caught my eye was the 6 different R News. And R News is Reddit's news page, which apparently is its most trafficked page and leads to a lot of things hitting the front. And I'm somewhat unqualified because I don't read Reddit.
Yeah, I'm with you there. No principle. It's just not on my list.
But I do know that it has a lot of influence on traffic, and getting on the front page of Reddit is important for online news sites in that sense. So it has some power, so it's worth taking a look at how they do things. And if you look at the Daily Dot article, it talks about the decision to remove Glenn Greenwald's piece at First Look or The Intercept, whatever they're actually called today. And it was his piece that, it was an important piece, but not as important, I thought, as other revelations. It talks about basically dirty tricks that the NSA or other intelligence agencies, in this case it was the British intelligence agency, GCHQ, does in terms of attacking detractors or people they want to discredit. And it talks about, you look at their different slides that Glenn got from Snowden, I suppose. It talks about disruption, operational playbook, infiltration, operation, ruse, set piece, false flag, and the honeypot, the sting, all the things you hear about spies doing. And it's just translated into a much wider field of action. Now, again, I think it's an important story. I don't think it was the most important story. But what caught my eye about, and they pulled that story because Glenn, as he does is very editorializes and opinionates in his news reporting. It is news reporting, but it's obviously comes with a slant. I think the good news is that going in, it's not hidden. And it's one of my pet peeves is that there is no true neutral news reporting. But I'll get to that in a second because I want to go to in the Daily Dot, they talk about 6 different Reddit news rules that are used to eliminate certain sources and pieces from that subreddit. Mm-hmm. Opinion analysis. This section includes domains such as alternate, demand of progress, and opposing views. Basically, any domain which predominantly purports misleading or analytic content. I don't know who purports misleading content, but we'll leave that aside. Or opinion.
Daily misleader. I'm going to start that one.
Right. Or opinionated content, or content which intends to promote one cause over another. Our news is for strictly factual news reporting, and as such, opinion posts, analysis posts are removed. Let's start with that. Strictly factual news reporting. That doesn't exist. You can't do it, even if you wanted to. Even if you were fair and neutral, you have to give context, or a story is fairly pointless, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It makes me want to join Reddit and petition for the removal of any news story that says that the Senate rejected XYZ by a vote of 58 to 42, and say, well, wait a minute, no. What, it didn't reject it by the vote. It rejected taking up a vote on it, and you don't understand how motions to proceed and the filibuster work, or anything that refers to a test vote, or that the Senate refused to move forward. Now, this was a filibuster. You're reporting it wrong. That's factually incorrect. Remove all references to this. You're down to a very little amount of news.
Yeah, ironically, the only sources that would get it right would be accused of being opinionated, right? Because there's a point to be made there.
Yeah,
that's a great example. I mean, it really is. If instead of running the New York Times story, which would do it the way you just said, it ran a story on Daily Kos saying the Republican minority blocked the consideration of the bill using the majority restraining filibuster tradition.
Yeah,
you would say, well, that's opinionated. You can't write that, but that's happened. But which one's the truth?
That's the actual fact of it. But yeah, I don't know. You're saying that you're putting a spin on it. Now I'm explaining what happened procedurally. Well, but then, you shouldn't be blaming it on Republicans. I don't know what to tell you. I'll take the word Republican out, I guess. I can't. You can look it up for yourself. Go see their affiliations and see if I'm not. But I don't even know why I should take that out. Am I wrong? Were there Democrats voting against cloture on this?
Exactly. I mean, I think that you hit on one of the best ways to illustrate it. How the neutral reporting would be wrong, but they would accept it, and the opinionated reporting on that, in their minds, would be right, but they wouldn't run it because it wasn't, quote, neutral, unquote.
Yeah, great way to educate your audience, Reddit. Excellent. Fantastic. Make sure they never understand the procedure of one of the branches of their government.
Yeah, and I'll give you another example. Today's New York Times, and it's a good story. It's by Annie Lowry, spouse of Ezra Klein, about the deficit shrinking to $680 billion, the lowest it's been since 2008, since before 2008. And the story is, neutral. It reports this. It has a graph that shows what's happened. It talks about 4% of GDP, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? It still has a slant to me. And the slant is reducing the deficit is good. My point of view is that it's not good because the economy is not in a place where we should be worrying about reducing the deficit. The deficit should be higher, not lower. Okay, so that's my opinion. But the point is the neutral reporting assumes that it's a good thing that the deficit's gone down. You see?
Yeah.
And there is no neutral reporting. Everything starts with assumptions. We all assume the Constitution is a great thing, right? And by and large, that's my opinion, too. There's lots of things I don't like about it. The Senate, for example, I think is an abomination. The existence of the Senate, I don't think it should exist. But
that's a big part of it. But yeah, okay, I get your point. George Mason says, no, by the way, all of you are crazy. And isn't that, it'd be great. It's a letter from the grave from George Mason and Elbridge Gerry, both writing and saying, this underlying assumption that the Constitution is so great is absolutely opinion, and a bad opinion at that. You're crazy. But they're also founding fathers. They have to be right. So what do we do with this? Anti-constitutionalists from the founders era, people who refused to sign.
Right.
I don't know.
And it goes to this whole notion, we're going to find the reputable, neutral reporting, and that's all we're going to report. Mm-hmm. It's silly. Now, the other link I sent you, I thought it was an interesting discussion of the subject by Matthew Ingram, who is a professor at NYU. And he makes a very good point, and that is, the fact is that traditional media is struggling with this so-called neutral point. Jay Rosen wrote a lot of good things about it, I think about 6 months ago. Of course, Jay's sort of disqualified now because he's going to work with First Look. So people, he's not neutral anymore. But the point is that you can't just take at face value that there is neutrality in traditional reporting, because there isn't. There's built-in assumptions. We don't start from absolute ground zero on anything. We can't build our reporting from any particular point. Everything comes in with assumptions, opinions, and while there's fairness is something to strive for, the idea of neutrality is silly, in my view. There is no neutrality in reporting. There can't be. Nobody starts from a blank slate. We have built-in assumptions in everything we believe already, and that's part of what's reported. So the idea that we challenge, at least in this Twitter conversation, a lot of us did. Some of the people didn't accept the good faith, and I think that's possible that the Reddit moderator wasn't acting in good faith. But even if he was, the rules that they state are flawed. There is no neutral reporting. And, again, if I had to argue the case, I would use the example you provided us. How is neutral reporting of the filibuster filibustering of legislation done. Nobody reports it properly. And in fact, because they're so quote-unquote neutral, they misreport the story time after time after, and they never correct it. To date, has any of the major media sources ever properly reported the use of the filibuster to your knowledge?
I don't know. I assume that somebody has, but it's not in front page news, straight news reporting. No, and I know they think it's editorial shorthand to do things the way they do it, but only in columns do you ever find the thing explained correctly.
Right. In a story on the front page of the New York Times, the liberal New York Times, never, in my experience, have I seen them report a filibuster accurately.
Just fails in a test vote, which is that one was always driven me particularly crazy. Not just misreporting and mis-explaining how things work, but what's a test vote? It doesn't count? What are you talking about? We're counting the names. It's on the record. What's test about it? That's just the term that they made up. That's horrible. That's horrible reporting. There's no such thing as a test vote. It counts. Something happened or didn't happen because this vote was held. It's not like, we'll test it. If it doesn't come out the way we want, we'll throw it out and start over again. No, it's a real vote. It's a procedural vote. You don't want to explain it, so you just say it's a test vote.
It'll be interesting to see how it goes with the unemployment, the minimum wage
test vote.
Because there'll be a, quote, test vote in March, and we'll see. And my understanding is that Reid is looking for something that gets 60 votes. Mm-hmm. Now, when we're just talking about Republicans and Democrats, but in that case, there's going to be a change to the bill because I don't know if it's Manchin or Pryor or whoever is part of a group that wants a change on the minimum wage bill. Now, the worth of the Senate passing it can be debated. I mean, I assume that Boehner's not going to put forward the minimum wage hike, but the reporting on it's going to be terrible. You're going to see. Watch. It's going to be Senate blocks, and they'll even have a fake excuse this time. They'll say, well, some Democrats were too. It wasn't just Republicans. Because Pryor Manchin says, wait, that's misunderstanding the filibuster also.
Right.
We should only need 50 votes.
Right. When they say things like that, Senate rejects XYZ by a vote of 58 to 40. They didn't reject it. They accepted it. What they did was something else. Why aren't you reporting that? Oh, because everybody knows XYZ. Well, no, they don't. And even if they did, so what? If everybody knows it, then they know now that you're wrong in the way you're reporting it. So let's take your excuse for it. Everybody knows. Everybody knows you're wrong and misreporting it. Why is that your rule? Why is doing it wrong your rule? Especially when your rule says, well, we'll only allow for it to be done right. And how will I prove it? By doing it wrong in your face.
Right. I mean, I think that's actually one of the most prominent of fictions that, quote, neutral reporting, unquote, will be doing going forward. Now, I think that I'm worried also about the reporting on the Hobby Lobby case. I'm sure it's going to be misreported inaccurately by neutral sources, but that'll be at the top of the Reddit news feed, I guess, because accurate though opinionated reporting will be shunted aside by this rule. It's silly and Reddit, which who owns it. I know how it operates with a lot of people, and moderators get elected by vote or whatever, and they play this game. But it was always attempted to be some type of alternative news source, and obviously, given the rules, it's playing out.
Yeah. That's really funny. I mean, so what's the value of an alternative news source that says we will allow only the most or only the least informative, most mainstream sources that don't call anything into question? What kind of an alternative is that? I don't know. Oh, let's see. We dropped your signal here, Armando, so we'll see if we can get you reconnected. It says it's ringing. I'd like to accept that call. How about that? What does Skype have to say about that? Ringing. Yes. So supposing it's ringing, I would then say hello and press what button? I don't know. It doesn't seem to want to connect you. All right, we'll give it a shot. Keep working on it. I've got these two articles open, and we can certainly begin to review those. Not only the Daily Dot, but you also have sent me the Giga-Ohm piece on this, which is interestingly illustrated. Somebody floating on their back and reading a newspaper, presumably in the Dead Sea, because I think that's the only place that you can do what this person is doing. Floating on their back in a natural body of water, reading the newspaper without getting the newspaper wet. So, we have an Israeli photo here. I wonder what paper he's reading. I can't zoom in closely enough. Is there somewhere else in the world that you can do that? Can you do that in the Salt Lake? I have no idea. If I could connect Armando again, I would ask him. At any rate, they headline their piece, Reddit is having the same problem as traditional media, defining what the news is. And I suppose we've made our point here with this one. Reddit, the alternative news source, is having the same problem as the old news source that you were supposed to be getting an alternative from. The summary here, this is great. They'll just summarize what they're saying. Is the critics of Reddit point to a moderator's repeated removal of a Glenn Greenwald story as proof that the site can't be trusted to do journalism, to do that journalism. But in reality, the moderator's behavior is no worse and in some ways better than that of a newspaper editor. Interesting. Okay. Generally speaking, I mean, I get the point that it's clear to me that there's something different about what Glenn Greenwald is doing. It's just not clear to me that that's something that ought to be excluded. I don't know. All right, Armando, I believe you're back with us here.
Yeah, I gave such an eloquent speech that I'm sure you didn't hear.
It was great. I agreed with it.
Yes, I'm sure you did. Anyway, I don't know if you heard the part where there was a happy ending to the story on Twitter. The R News, the Reddit news guy who we were conversing with, has agreed to take a look at their criteria for inclusion in R News subreddit, and he's going to consult with Jay Rosen and with Matthew Ingram and discuss what might be problematic with the way they do things. So yeah, happy ending.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I guess it's nice that he's agreed to take a look, and that's, I suppose, all you can ask for. They do run this thing; it is theirs, so that's fine. And I was looking at that Ingram piece that you sent. I was puzzling over the photo that they're using for illustration. Where, how many bodies of water, natural bodies of water, can you float in and read the newspaper? I thought of the Dead Sea. Arliss Bunny says Mono Lake, California, I guess, is a possibility. Can you do this in the Salt Lake, the Great Salt Lake? Would you go into that? Is that someplace you would swim?
I've always been confused about that. Can you swim? I thought it'd kill you if you went into this Great Salt Lake.
I don't know. That maybe people would kill you.
I'll go to that other aggregator, which is, I think, terrible. Wikipedia, and see what they say.
Yes. So now there's a place where I think they have somehow, as annoying as their editors are, they've managed to serve their mission and convince themselves that they allow only fact, but in a way that actually kind of works somehow. Not really sure. And I guess that's because their editors provide the content as opposed to Redditors just accepting or rejecting other people's content.
That's well.
Yeah. So where else can you swim? It's interesting. I don't know. Would it kill you to go into Salt Lake? If it doesn't kill you to go in the Dead Sea, I don't know why anything else would kill you.
You're probably right. But, well, anyway, it's saltier than most things, though probably not the Dead Sea. It's certainly saltier than the ocean. Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah, there's a big hole in the Wikipedia article because it doesn't say whether you can go swimming there or not.
Okay. Well, I don't know. It's I'll ask some Utahns, and there are many listening to the show. They'll be listening on podcast. Email me. Tell me if you can swim in the Great Salt Lake. Not can you so much as would you? Like, can you swim in the Hudson River? That's maybe a no, but you could fall into it.
Before the answer was clearly no, but it's
better now.
It's much better now, and you probably can swim, but
Right. Well, no one wants to or whatever, but is it a thing? Because when you get to the Dead Sea, you want to swim in it. It's a big deal to swim in the Dead Sea, and if you're a Republican congressman, apparently swim nude. That's an old story, but it actually happened that. Some guys on a junket to Israel decided to skinny dip in it was the Sea of Galilee. That's right. Okay. Which maybe in some ways is worse. Honestly, I don't know. But at any rate, don't skinny dip anywhere. Honestly, if you're a congressman.
Well, there are images for swimming in the Great Salt Lake, reported images. So apparently you can.
All right, good. Well, everyone should give it a try. It's one of the more interesting things you could do, as you see in this picture. You float on your back and read the newspaper. It looks like I'm looking closely. I don't know. Maybe it looks like there's, maybe it's Arabic writing on the back. I bet that is a Dead Sea picture. I did that. And, so...
That's funny. I looked up a page, and it's sort of like our Hudson River reaction. Someone asked the tourist guide, can you swim in the Great Salt Lake? And his response was, you can, but why would you want to?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so...
Right. I mean, so it's not a thing, and there's no bathing clubs on the shores of the Great Salt Lake the way there is with the Dead Sea. And there's presumably no, medicinal value to bathing in the Great Salt Lake. I don't know what the value of bathing in the Dead Sea is, but there are minerals in there, and there's a whole industry dedicated to skincare products made from the minerals extracted from the Dead Sea. I don't know if it's a great idea, but it's there.
Yeah, apparently also Great Salt Lake there's a lot of mineral extraction as well.
Okay. And there's a race. Blue DuPage says a Great Salt Lake swim race. And I guess NPR has a thing. The race is to get out and get showered.
Is it a polar bear thing? I don't know,
Maybe. Yes, salt flies.
Maybe Scott Brown will go take a dip in the Great Salt Lake for his political campaign.
Yeah, all right.
Like he did the polar bear thing. He was the one guy who took off all his clothes in the polar bear thing. Scott Brown.
You don't have to do that.
No, you're not supposed to, apparently. It was crazy. Nobody else did. It was just Scott Brown. He had to show off his Cosmo body, I guess.
I guess so. Well, all right. So
anyway, so that's the story behind the Reddit thing.
Good, all right.
There was, I'll just leave you one thought, not to discuss, but just to the listeners, that Politico's story on Joe Biden I thought was pretty interesting, by Glenn Thrush. And it just gave me this thought. It was that, it really proves to me that they're not crappy because they're crappy. They're crappy because they choose to be crappy. Because when they wanted to do a good article, and I thought the Glenn Thrush's article on Biden was really pretty good.
Yeah.
They can do it. So I leave you with that thought. It's crappy by Politico, crappy by choice.
Well, it's a choice, and we have to respect their right to make it. We can't.
That's right. I will not be bigoted against their choice to be crappy.
All right. Well, okay.
Have a great weekend. Have a great weekend, everybody.
All right. Thanks for coming by to explain this one to us, Armando. I'll be looking further into it. I understand our own Susan Gardner, very much up to speed, not only on how Reddit works and how it makes its decisions, but its implications for news and the future of news. It was all very heavy to me, but I don't know. I've never considered Reddit a news source, so it's okay by me. I'll live with that. The Daily Dot was very informative on that. Story, by the way, written in that we gave credit for the Giga-Ohm piece to Matthew Ingram properly, since he wrote it, or at least according to the byline. So why not credit for the Daily Dot Fernando Alfonso III, who is not the King of Castile or anything like that, or Aquitaine for that matter, but Fernando Alfonso, and also not the Formula One driver, who I understand is out there, but Fernando Alfonso III, maybe he's related to the Formula One driver, but nice job on your Daily Dot thing, even if you are the Formula One driver. Wouldn't that be interesting? You're Formula One but you're the Fernando Alfonso III. I wonder if Fernando Alfonso I should have been driving in Formula One. Just a little Roman numeral question here for you. Okay, so what's swimming around in Pocket that we need to get to? Well, honestly, too much to name. I wonder, while I'm puzzling over what to bring you next, I want to take another look at my favorite distraction, Cocaine Incorporated. Where did we leave that? And how far have we got left yet to go? It looks like we're getting down towards the end here, but you know what? Let's use our time for that, because we were just right in the middle of, I thought, some of the most interesting part about how they deal with, if we think of cocaine cartels as the article exhorts us to, Cocaine Incorporated, and El Chapo as the CEO, and bribes as their taxes, then really what they're doing here is we're looking at the intergovernmental relations sector of Cocaine Incorporated. And by the way, an interesting question just floated up over Skype from Justice, who asks this question: would Reddit refuse my memorial to Aaron Swartz? That's interesting, but I don't think they would refuse to publish it, but they might refuse to put it in their news section, their news, what do they call it? I don't know what, whatever, their news page. Oh, okay. Not to ruin the joke, Armando tells me, but the driver is Alonso, not Alfonso. Is that right? I was looking it up, and I don't know. Yeah, Alonso came. Okay, so I looked it up. I put in Fernando Alfonso, and it also brings up, because Google, Fernando Alfonso III is our first hit, and our second hit is Fernando Alonso in Wikipedia, interestingly enough. So Fernando Alonso, not Alfonso, and he would take offense at that and probably run me over if I gave him half a chance. He looks like a mean guy. He looks like a fine guy. I don't know. I'm sure everything's great. So yeah, he's a Ferrari driver. So they're all fantastic people. Okay, you don't have much choice. I think Formula One drivers are an interesting breed. I don't know how tolerant of ridicule they are. Well, that's a European thing more than a Formula One thing. Well, anyway, moving on, having alienated all of Europe after alienating the American West the other day, I wanted to take a look at the Intergovernmental Relations Department of Cocaine Incorporated. This was so interesting to me about how one of the things that they noted in this article was that when you tallied it all up, bribery may be the single largest line item on a cartel's balance sheet. And this, of course, we're talking about a cartel that, one, buys and flies and sometimes abandons its own 747s and submarines, fully submersible, fully functional submarines, and has the money to build air-conditioned, ventilated tunnels underneath the U.S.-Mexican border and abandon them when necessary. And by the way, also abandoned hundreds of millions of dollars worth of cocaine with them occasionally too. And yet, bribery is the biggest item on their balance sheet, which is interesting because, of course, if they were a legitimate business, and one of the benefits of being legitimized is you can lower that line item significantly by moving into legitimate business and paying our super low corporate income tax rate instead, which of course makes them all cry and whine terribly when they have to pay it. Meanwhile, you think you have problems, look at these guys running Cocaine Incorporated. Well, anyway, we left off, I believe, by pointing out that in key jurisdictions, as the article says, the cartel most likely makes payments up and down the chain of command, and that in a 2010 speech, Genaro Garcia Luna, Mexico's Secretary of Public Security, speculated that together the cartels spend more than $1 billion each year, just to bribe the municipal police. All right, but it continues. It's not only officials who must be bribed either. There are also the Falcons, an army of civilian lookouts who might receive $100 a month just to keep their eyes open and make a phone call if they notice an uptick in border inspections or a convoy of police. There are cities in Mexico where virtually every cab driver is on the payroll, as Thomas Friedman might have it. Michael Brown, formerly of the DEA, said they have eyes and ears everywhere. And loyal eyes and ears, of course, because they're paying them money. I mean, this is how this kind of enterprise... You ever wonder, how could such an obviously criminal enterprise operate in the middle of decent society? And the answer is, it creates society by passing out as much money as it does. Not at all dissimilar to the way the mafia in its golden age, if there was such a thing, operated in the United States. It was a civic society. It took care of the Italian-American community and even a larger part of the community. And it did it in a cynical and evil and terrible way and skimmed much of the profit off the top and enriched people individually at the expense of the community. Yes, but why tolerate the mafia? Not just because it might kill you, but also because it kind of throws a little bit of business your way. Maybe you agree to do work for them and they spend money with you and they tip pretty well. Or just because, they put on the San Gennaro Festival or something like that. They knew what successful feudal lords knew, that it wasn't simply the case that you could rely on the divine order of things in all cases to keep you in power. Passing out some portion of the profits was essential. Even in an age that was in which we saw even greater income and wealth disparity than we see today, and the system was built on the premise that it ought to be that way. How does such a thing survive? One, fear, and two, just enough crumbs to the people that they don't get fed up and overcome their fears. Similarly, $100 a month to cab drivers means that they don't band together in some sort of crime-fighting militia, as they have in some places where the money hasn't been good enough, and fight against, or at least somehow undermine, the operation of the cocaine cartel. It's better to just take the $100 and play along. All right, so what else? They also, of course, have to deal with the Americans. This is, up to this point, this is about how they bribe Mexicans. Guards at the U.S. border have been known to wave a car through their checkpoints for a few $1,000s. And since 2004, there have been 138 convictions or indictments in corruption investigations involving members of the United States Custom and Border Protection. So, again, more of the corruption that's just too facially obvious to believe that it exists, but it exists in volume. 138 convictions or indictments. It's gotten to that level since 2004 of just guards. Here's a couple $1,000. Will you let me through? And it's obvious that I'm asking you to do that because my car is full of cocaine, but all right, go ahead anyway. Paradoxically, one explanation for this state of affairs is the rapid expansion of border forces following the creation of the Department of Homeland Security. In their hurry to fortify the U.S.-Mexico boundary with uniformed personnel, it seems, officials may have made allowances on background checks and screenings. In some instances, job offers have been extended to the immediate relatives of known traffickers. Doi. When corruption fails, and this is, again, an illustration of every point we've been talking about, right? When corruption, and remember that you can substitute the word taxation and redistribution of income for corruption. When that fails, there's always, what have I always said there always is? Violence. Yes. During the 12 years that he worked for the cartel, Martinez claims that he did not carry a gun. But Sinaloa has risen to preeminence as much through savagery as through savvy. Equal parts. You want to keep things balanced. Both sides. In illegal markets, the natural tendency is toward monopoly, so they fight each other. Yay, free market. Antonio Mazzatelli, an official with the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime in Mexico City, told me. How do they fight? Go to court? Offer better prices? No, they use violence. The primal horror of Mexico's murder epidemic makes it difficult perhaps even distasteful, to construe the cartel's butchery as a rational advancement of coherent business aims, but the reality is that in a multi-billion-dollar industry in which there is no recourse to legally enforceable contracts, some degree of violence may be inevitable. Don't like courts very much, Jonah Goldberg? Fine, some degree of violence may be inevitable. Like to minimize that violence? Give people clear channels through which they can solve their problems non-violently and collectively in a predictable system, and it will work wonders. Write exemptions into it, and gosh, I don't really know what's going to happen. I'm not saying that the gay community is going to rise up and slaughter the bigoted cake makers, but I am saying there will be some kind of reaction. It has to be that way. If it wasn't, if there was no reaction, if there was no adverse effect, you wouldn't be talking about a dynamic economy. And you don't want that, do you? You're all about dynamic economies. It's like geopolitics, to return to the article. Tony Placido said, you need to use violence frequently enough that the threat is believable, but overuse it and it's bad for business. They're killing people like it's free. The most gratuitous practitioners of violence right now would be the Zetas. Not Catherine Zeta-Jones, but other Zetas. The Zetas, a rampaging league of sociopaths. Uh-oh. I hope we don't have a rampaging league of sociopaths in this country. Because they have them in Mexico, and guess what? They are as well armed as the government. And here's what they do with it. Freedom and liberty? No. They have a notable devotion to physical cruelty instead. The Zetas are a new kind of cartel in that they came somewhat late to the actual business of smuggling drugs. They started out as bodyguards for the Gulf Cartel before going into business for themselves, and they specialize in messaging through bloodshed. It's just a medium for them. The medium is the message, is essentially what they're telling you. Isn't that exactly what they're telling you? Absolutely. And the message is the medium, and the medium is the message, and back and forth. The lines are blurred. Interesting. They came late to the actual business of smuggling drugs. They're just raising capital, man. They're making a rational economic decision. You know, why do the Hells Angels, why do motorcycle gangs sell drugs? They need capital. And what the hell? They can outgun the cops or the local authorities and operate with impunity, and everyone wants to stay away from them because they have a reputation for violence. Oh well. You also want cash? I think drugs are probably the way you're going to go. Arm a militia? And, you know, is the flag going to keep them from selling meth? I don't think so. Besides which, they're just exercising their, liberty. People want meth. What can I do? I say, why have the government get in the way of that? Pot's legal. Let's have meth, too. Mr. Government Man is keeping me down? I don't think so. All right. So the Zetas, it turns out, are the ones who charged with dumping 49 mutilated bodies by the side of a highway near Monterey last month. Sinaloa is responsible for a great deal of carnage as well, but its approach to killing has traditionally been more discreet. They don't like to invite that much scrutiny, I guess. Whereas a Sinaloa subsidiary, allied with the Tijuana farmer known as the Stew Maker, who dissolved hundreds of bodies in barrels of lye, the Zetas have pioneered a multimedia approach to violence, touting their killings on YouTube. One strategic choice facing any cartel is deciding when to intimidate the civilian population and when to cultivate it. Is this not, by the way, the same choice faced by everyone? Well, how extraordinary. I mean, they're such sociopaths. They have to they're actually making a conscious decision over whether or not to intimidate the civilian population versus when to cultivate it. In other words, of course, they're asking whether to destroy the village in order to save it, or whether or not they should be napalming the Cambodian countryside, or, for that matter, invading various countries, etc., etc. And we're not the only ones by any stretch of the imagination who are doing this sort of thing, and it's happened throughout history. But, it's the kind of decision that gets made by governments and pseudo-governments like this. So, let's see. They have to decide whether to win hearts and minds or blow them up. Sinaloa can be exceedingly brutal, but the cartel is more pragmatic than the Zetas. You see, there's gradations here. They're not crazy. They're pragmatic drug dealers. They're more pragmatic anyway than the Zetas in its deployment of violence. It may simply be, as one Obama administration official suggested, that the Sinaloa leadership is more conscious of their brand. I love it. This article is fantastic in making the case. It's a curious rivalry between these two organizations because their business models are really very different. The Zetas have diversified beyond drugs. Why simply sell drugs? It's a big pain in the neck. I mean, people love it and all that. But what if you can't get a hold of drugs? Or what if you get shot by the other guys because you're on their drug turf? Well, how about this? Let's diversify, like any organized crime cartel might do, into extortion, kidnapping, and human trafficking, blossoming into what officials call a polycriminal organization. The mob. We're into everything. Sinaloa, by contrast, has mostly tended to stick to its core competence of trafficking. According to one captured cartel member, Chapo specifically instructed his subordinates not to dabble in protection rackets and insisted that Sinaloa territory remain calm and controlled. Remind you of any scenes from The Godfather? Certain businesses we just stay out of. And other businesses in which some people have a specialty or relative advantage can be loaned to others, leveraged by others, in exchange for favors, cash, what have you, any exchange of thing of value. Don Corleone has all the politicians and judges, right? They have all the transport and trafficking ability for the drugs. We need a little extortion done? Don't expand yourself into extortion. Subcontract it and throw them a little drug biz to make a payment. Sinaloa does not do extortion directly, as a matter of fact. Eduardo Guerrero said, it's so risky and the profits are so small. They want the big business, and the big business is in the United States. Just how active the cartel is north of the border is a divisive question. According to the Department of Justice, by 2009, Mexican-based criminal organizations were operating in more than 1,000 U.S. cities. Wow. And where? I'm not even sure. But remember, we heard about they had their own growing operation. Where? In like Idaho or something like that. I forget where the farm was now that I think about it. Wisconsin? I have no idea. Anyway, they're operating more than 1,000 U.S. cities. When you consider the huge jump in the price of narcotics between bulk importation and retail sales, it might seem that Chapo would want to expand into street-level distribution. In 2005, the DEA began intercepting large shipments of cocaine in which each kilo brick was heat-sealed in a distinctive mylar foil. They first spotted the foil in Los Angeles and then Oklahoma. That would be my natural next guess. Chicago, Atlanta, and New Jersey. This was Sinaloa coke. Michael Wardrop, who led two of the agency's most ambitious operations against the domestic networks of the cartel, told me. As the telltale wrapping popped up across the country, Wardrop and his colleagues marveled at the sheer expanse of Sinaloa's market. It was like watching a virus in a petri dish. He said it was constantly growing. Wardrop's investigations netted more than 1,000 arrests, but some observers questioned the extent to which the perpetrators in these cases were actually working for the cartel. If you're telling me there's a straight chain of command back to El Chapo in Sinaloa, come on. That's absurd, the Mexican ambassador Arturo Sarucán protested. Often the gatekeepers and logistics men that the DEA arrested were indeed connected to handlers in Mexico, but this was more true of high-level importers dealing in kilos than run-of-the-mill retailers pushing grams. When the Associated Press tracked down Otis Rich, a Baltimore dealer who was ensnared in one of the operations, he answered the obvious question with a telling reply. Sina who? Yeah, these guys don't know what they're selling. They just want product. The fully integrated model would indeed maximize profits, John Bailey observes in a coming book about the cartels, but it also maximizes risk of exposure. A big reason for the markup at the retail level is that the sales force is so exposed, out on the corner, a magnet for undercover cops, obliged to negotiate with a needy, unpredictable clientele. When you adjust for all that added risk, the windfall starts to seem less alluring. Like a liquor wholesaler who opts not to open a bar, Chapo appears to have decided that the profits associated with retail sales just aren't worth the hassle. It would cost so much to bribe your way out of those problems, it's not worth the hassle. Or to protect us, or to fight it, or to lobby for the legalization of your product, which might diminish its value anyway. What Sinaloa does do inside this country is ferry drugs along highways to regional distribution hubs, where they are turned over to trusted wholesalers like the Flores twins of Chicago. And before even getting into what they do, I mean, essentially they're just saying, oh yeah, we're the FedEx hub, and we'll move the drugs reliably and quickly, but only to certain hubs. After that, retail level distribution, last mile operations are contracted out. It's just not worth the headache. So who are the Flores twins of Chicago? Pedro and Margarito Flores, who grew up in a Mexican-American enclave in the city during the 1990s. Their father and an older brother had moved drugs for Sinaloa, and by the time the twins were in their 20s, they had gone into business as distributors, purchasing cocaine and heroin directly from Mexican cartels, then selling to dealers throughout the United States. They're brokers, that's all. Chicago, home of the Mercantile Exchange, has always been a hub from which legitimate goods fan out across the country, and it's no different for black market commodities. Chapo has used the city as a clearinghouse since the early 1990s. He once described it as his home port. Why? One, there's Mexican Americans there, yes, but two, transportation. You didn't think that they were not going to use existing transportation corridors simply because they're moving illegal drugs, did you? They need transportation corridors. In 2005, the Flores twins were flown to a mountaintop compound in Sinaloa to meet with Chapo Guzman. The kingpin is an intimidating interlocutor. One criminal who has negotiated with him face-to-face told me that Chapo tends to dominate a conversation, asking a lot of questions and compensating for his short stature by bouncing on the balls of his feet. But the meeting went well, and before long the brothers were distributing around 2 tons of Sinaloa product each month. As preferred customers, they had the rewards card. You see, they often took Chapo's drugs without putting any money down. Too big to fail in all the financial benefits that accrue to Wall Street tycoons accrue here too. No money down because they're preferred customers. Then they paid the cartel only after they sold the product. You can't get away with that as a street dealer, but as a preferred wholesaler, you can. This might seem unlikely given the pervasive distrust in the underworld, but the narcotics trade is based on a robust and surprisingly reliable system of credit. In a sense, a cartel like Sinaloa has no choice but to offer a financing option because few wholesale buyers have the liquidity to pay cash up front for a ton of cocaine. They have to offer lines of credit, Wardrop told me, no different from Walmart or Sears. This credit system, known as fronting, rests on an ironclad assumption, yes, that's an understatement, that in the American marketplace, even an idiot salesman should have no trouble selling drugs. One convicted Sinaloa trafficker told me that it often took him more time to count the money he collected from his customers than it did to actually move the product. It may also help that the penalty for defaulting could involve dismemberment. Yeah, so pretty good system, right? Huge market. Even an idiot could sell the stuff, and we'll kill you if you don't give us the money. Okay. That might be a robust market. As wholesale buyers, the Flores brothers occupied a crucial bottleneck between the cartel and its consumers. They grew so indispensable, in fact, that after taking delivery of a shipment of drugs, they could retroactively bargain down the price. The economics of this. One day in 2008, Pedro Flores telephoned Guzman in Mexico to ask for a discount on heroin. What did we agree on? Chapo asked him. According to a government transcript of the call, they had negotiated a price of $55,000 per kilo. Flores explained, but if Chapo would consider lowering that to $50,000, the twins could pay immediately. See? So cash price is better. Very good. That price is fine. Chapo agreed with that argument. Then he added something significant. Do you have a way to bring that money over here? For the Sinaloa cartel, pushing product north into the United States is only half of the logistical equation. The drug trade is a cash business. You can't buy kilos with your credit card. So, while politicians tend to focus on cartels primarily as importers of drugs, the narcos also... Oh dear, we don't have our outro music here. Let me see if I can't quit and then restart soundboard, because it's really going to be annoying if we don't have our outro music. We definitely want to have that. Let's see. There we go. It's coming, but only through... Pipe it through. Here we go. Now we're talking. But this was a point that was made earlier in the story. While politicians focus on cartels primarily as importers of drugs, the narcos also devote an enormous amount of energy to the export of money. How interesting. It's actually something we've talked about quite a bit in our discussions over capitalism, of capitalism in general. Why we tend to give such advantage to capital side of the equation versus the labor side of the equation. And of course, a lot of the reason has to do with the portability of capital. As opposed to the portability, it's difficult to move labor around, at least in quantity. And I guess that's why it's preferred by the market. So very interesting. There's still much more, of course, to this article. We are getting towards the end. We are going to finish it. But tune in on Monday so that we can all listen in and tweet your questions to us for Arliss Bunny when we talk about what a bonanza the Affordable Care Act has been for our small business. That will be real interesting. Stay tuned today for the rest of the Netroots Radio lineup. And let's see. What else can we promote for next Monday? Geez, I don't know. Besides Arliss Bunny, I think we're going to have an interesting look into this thing. We'll try and finish up with this cocaine stuff. Naturally, things will happen over the weekend. Lots of gun fail happening and gun fail stories. Look for the next installment soon. I'll be back to talk to you Monday.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.